Most people probably don't relate Linkin Park or myself with, alcoholism or drug addiction or anything like that. And, but that's a part of my life, and that's been a part of my life since I was a very young boy.
If you ever listen to Linkin Park, then it's very clear that the band dove deep into the aspects of mental health issues and depression. And although their first album is massively successful and is considered their best project, at the time, Linkin Park got lumped in with the edgy teen bands that were everywhere in the early 2000s, like the Blink-182s and the Limp Bizkits. And what a lot of these bands did was lean into theatrics and not take themselves seriously. But Linkin Park was different. Because they were more experimental, mixing rap with rock, screams with soft vulnerability, they were mocked. Critics brushed them off as a corny or overly dramatic band. But for teenagers and young adults who were dealing with pain like the members of the band, they understood that Linkin Park spoke to them in more ways than they could understand. For most of their fans, their music was way ahead of its time, but it came at the perfect time, bringing in comfort and putting into words the stuff that a lot of people didn't know how to express themselves. And when you learn what Chester actually went through, it makes even more sense why his voice carried so much weight. Chester Bennington had one of the most heartbreaking upbringings in rock history. He was sexually abused by an older male friend starting at the age of 7 years old, something he kept secret for years out of fear, shame, and confusion. In interviews, he talked about how the trauma made him feel disgusted with himself, like he was broken before he even had a chance to grow up, keeping his feelings to himself out of fear that people would think that he was either gay or lying about what happened. And on top of that, his parents divorced when he was 11 years old, and he ended up living with his father, a man who worked long hours and wasn't emotionally present. The irony of it all being that his dad worked as a detective for sexually children. By his teenage years, Chester was already spiraling. He turned to drugs and alcohol as a way to cope, experimenting with cocaine, meth, and LSD. In an interview, he admitted that he would sit in a room and smoke and party and drink to distract himself from the pain. He was also bullied in school, so it became a huge mixture of events that caused him to lose his self-confidence and feel extremely depressed, both physically and emotionally. He spent most of his time being a creative as a distraction. He would draw, write poetry, and escape into the music. It's easy to say that it's no exaggeration when he revealed that music was the only thing keeping him together. In the early 2000s, while other artists were still figuring out how to deal with leaks or piracy, Linkin Park leaned into the online world. They built a digital community before that was even a thing. From their official fan site and forums, the band actively used chat rooms and online forums to share demos to build their fan base. Hybrid Theory was a commercial smash hit, selling over 27 million copies worldwide, and remains one of the best-selling debut albums of all time. The album blended nu metal, rap, rock, and electronic elements. It was extremely experimental for its time, using different mixtures in their music, like melodies, rapping, and most importantly, scream singing to keep that metal rock flow. I think we all were Jay-Z at one point. They had the lead singles In the End, Paper Cut, and so many awards for this album, it's only natural to feel euphoric. But unfortunately for Chester, the fame didn't fix anything. In fact, it made things harder. Chester told Rolling Stone in 2002 that success felt like everything I ever wanted was right in front of me, and I didn't feel anything. He was still battling depression and substance abuse behind the scenes, even while Linkin Park was blowing up globally. After Hybrid Theory, things got darker before they got better. They continued working and touring, working on their second album while on tour. Every major artist was asking them to join their tour along with their own. In that year alone, they did over 300 shows. Although Linkin Park never intended on keeping the same genre on each album, for their second album, to maintain their momentum, they kept the nu metal sound, and it proved to be a great move. Meteora debuted at number 1 and sold over 800,000 copies its first week. At the time, it was the biggest album in the country. For a band that was first doubted by critics, they've managed to accomplish a lot in their first few years. The second album did a good job with how it resonated with their audience like their first album. Hybrid Theory is darker, heavier, and way more raw. Meteora, on the other hand, feels more focused. It's slicker and more commercial sounding, but it doesn't take away from the emotion. The album had the singles Somewhere I Belong, Breaking the Habit, Faint, and Numb. Again, as they continued to get more fame and notoriety, Chester was still dealing with a lot of underlying issues. He entered rehab during that era, and even after getting sober for a period, the underlying mental health issues never really left him. A lot of fans believe that Meteora mirrors the exact mental chaos that comes with surviving long-term trauma. CPTSD, or complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is the result of prolonged emotional abuse and neglect, especially during childhood, leaves people constantly on edge, unsure of themselves and struggling to feel safe even in calm environments. Similar to what Chester was dealing with as a child, he was open about his suicidal thoughts, the guilt he felt as a father, and the internal war between being grateful and being in pain. Mike is the core of Linkin Park. He's the original member who put the group together. He's also stupid talented, studying different genres of music as a kid, finding an appreciation for hip-hop music, which helped his role in the group as a rapper, but also the producer and co-writer. So when Jay-Z asked if Linkin Park wanted to do a mashup, he was on board immediately.
When Jay-Z came to us, Jay-Z's manager came to us about Collision Course, what became Collision Course, they said, you know, mashups are hot right now. MTV wants to do a show about mashups. Jay wants to do it with you. What they didn't know is that the person they were asking that question was a massive Jay-Z fan. I grew up doing mashups. Like, that's the way I learned to make music. I studied 12 years of classical piano, and immediately at the end of that pivoted into buying keyboards and samplers and like learning how to make beats. So doing that record was like getting to take all my favorite stuff and my favorite ways of making things and assembling them into something that I knew was for people like me.
The project dropped in 2004, and this cross-genre definitely shook the culture. Their mashup, Numb/Encore, exploded, staying on Billboard for over 25 weeks and eventually winning a Grammy for Best Rap Song/Collaboration. It was back-to-back accomplishments for the group. Chester, who on paper had the perfect life, but looks can be deceiving. Things were crumbling behind the scenes. So as a teenager, Chester was using drugs, and his addiction quickly spiraled out of control. He described feeling more confident and in control while high, turning to substances like acid, meth, crack, opium, and alcohol to escape his reality. He admitted to taking up to 11 hits of acid a day and using pot just to avoid harder drugs. At that point in his young life, he only weighed 110 pounds. Though he did eventually quit hard drugs, alcohol continued to be a serious issue. In a 2002 Rolling Stone interview, Chester explained that songs like Crawling were rooted in this self-destruction and deep internal shame. He emphasized that the song wasn't about blaming others, it was about owning the pain he felt and the consequences of his choices. It wasn't until 2006, following the collapse of his first marriage and some of his darkest moments, that he finally entered rehab. Chester admitted he had reached a breaking point where he could no longer function and seriously considered ending his own life. It got so bad that his bandmates decided to host an intervention for him, confronting him about how his behavior was affecting everyone. That wake-up call pushed him to seek help. He described himself as being two people, the Chester that everyone loved and the version of himself that he hated. He just began to understand that deep down, he didn't want to be that kind of Chester anymore. Minutes to Midnight, released in 2007, debuted at #1, selling over 600,000 copies its first week. It had the lead single, What I've Done, peaking at #7, and it was also featured on the soundtrack for the Transformers movie. It had the singles Bleed It Out and Leave Out All the Rest. The reception for the album was split between the fan bases almost immediately. Coming off the raw, aggressive energy of Hybrid Theory and Meteora, the album was a huge pivot. The band intentionally moved away from their nu metal roots, changing their guitar tuning, bringing in new producers, and experimenting with softer, more melodic ballads. It was also the first album where Mike sang more than he rapped. For longtime fans, this shift felt like the end of a sound that originally made Linkin Park iconic. 1,000 Suns released in 2010, and it was probably Linkin Park's boldest and most experimental album, and when it first dropped, a lot of fans hated it. The lead single, The Catalyst, set the tone, very different from their previous works. It completely abandoned the heavy guitars and rap rock formula. The critics and the fans were confused. Songs like Waiting for the End, Burning in the Skies, and Iridescent were the lead singles. Fans felt alienated by how far it strayed away from Linkin Park's original sound. But over time, 1,000 Suns grew on people. For fans who stuck with it, the album revealed itself as one of the band's most layered and meaningful works. It was less about the singles and more about the full journey. Years later, fans who originally dismissed it now rank it as one of their favorite Linkin Park albums. Living Things, released in 2012, felt like Linkin Park was trying to find a middle ground, a way to move forward without completely letting go of their past. Fans felt like the album was safe, but nonetheless a good album. It had the singles Castle of Glass and Burn It Down. After Living Things, Linkin Park continued to experiment with their sound. In 2014, they dropped The Hunting Party, which was a direct response to critics and fans who claimed they'd gone soft. But in all actuality, the band was just maturing with their music. By 2015-2016, as One More Light began taking shape, Chester's voice was noticeably strained. He wasn't in great health, and the vocal fragility was something both fans and members picked up on. The band collectively made a conscious choice to shift away from their heavier guitar-driven roots toward a more pop-rock direction. In the interviews, Mike explained that they focused on melody and vocals first, then built musical arrangements around them. They brought in writers to craft hooks that worked around Chester's changing vocal range. Tragedy struck on May 18, 2017, when Chester's close friend and grunge legend Chris Cornell died by. Chris and Chester were close friends with a personal bond. Chester sang at Chris's funeral, performing a stripped-down version of Hallelujah. He also wrote a heartbreaking open letter to Chris, thanking him for his voice, his friendship, and his honesty. He ended it saying, "I can't imagine a world without you. I pray you find peace in the next life." 2 months later, on July 20th, what would be Chris's 53rd birthday, Chester took his own life. He was found in his California home, and the timing broke everyone. His fans, his friends, his family, and especially his bandmates.
The band's frontman, Chester Bennington, found dead in his Palos Verdes Estates home. The coroner says it was
Linkin Park singer Chester Bennington remembered by fans at the Greek Theater.
Meteora was, a really influential album on my life, and my love for music helped me through a really hard time in my adolescence. And it's mental health is a really big issue, especially with creatives.
As of now, Linkin Park officially introduced their new lead singer, Kea Stewart, marking a new chapter for the band. While fans can be critical and are curious about the direction of this lineup, one thing remains certain: Chester's presence can never be replaced. His voice shaped Linkin Park's music, and he helped millions of fans during a low point in their lives. As Linkin Park continues to evolve, Chester may be gone, but he will never be forgotten. But let me know what you guys think down below about Linkin Park and their journey, and make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. Toodles!